Hi everybody, this is Michael Alago. You may know me from signing Metallica August 3rd, summer of 1984 at Roseland. And now here we are in 2024 on a new podcast called WIMR, Wherever I May Roam, with our host and my dear friend Dylan O'Lear.
Michael, it's been too long since we've seen each other in person.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for doing this podcast with me. I want to start by telling everybody how we met and how I got to sitting in your beautiful place here in Chelsea in New York City. It started back in 2017 when there was rumor of a documentary coming out about some type of involvement with a person in Metallica, something along the lines of who signed them. I remember hearing about it, and then I didn't hear anything for a little bit, and there was rumor it was going to come out on Netflix. And shortly after that, I go and visit my in-laws' house with my wife, and my father-in-law goes, "Hey, did you hear about that new documentary coming out about Metallica?" And I was like, "Yeah, I heard something about it, but I'm waiting for it to get released." And he goes, "Oh, well, it's out on Netflix now. I saw it this morning." I was like, "Well, let's sit down. We're watching it." So we sit down, and we start watching it. And then at that point, I'm already drawn in. I'm like, "Man, who is this person? I need to know more about him." So I find you on social media. I end up reaching out to you, and it was around March because my birthday was coming up and I knew I was going to take a trip to the city because I'd never been here. And I was like, "Oh, I'm not going to hear anything back from this person. Like, this is the guy who signed Metallica. Like, who am I?" And sure enough, a few weeks later, you reached out, and I asked if you'd be willing to meet and share some stories, and you said yeah. So I fly in, and like I feel all the jitters. I'm so excited, and I was here one day before meeting with you. And then I remember I come here, we meet up, we went out and got some lunch, and we sat down and talked a little bit, and it was a really good time. Then we came back, and you signed a book for me, and you also signed a DVD. And then going forward, we just continued to stay in touch, which then grew our beautiful relationship to now be sitting here again with you, and so
for
graciously,
your podcast,
which is amazing. Yep. Which also I have to mention that when I decided I want to do a podcast, I was thinking of different names and stuff, and actually I gave credit to one of my buddies I work with. He knows me, he knows how much I love Metallica. I go, "Hey, I need something that, is a little nod to them, but it's also me." And he asked some more about what my thoughts were for the podcast, and I said, I want to travel around and interview people that have impacted my life or others' lives and get to know who they are as a person aside from what they're known for. And he's like, "Well, let me get back to you." And later that night, because we work opposite shifts, he texted me a couple names, and one of them was Wherever I May Roam.
Oh, cool.
And immediately I felt the chills. I knew that was it. And then obviously with our friendship, I'm thinking, when this podcast is going to start, immediately the only fitting person to start this podcast with is no other than Michael Alago, the man who signed Metallica to Elektra and took them to where they are now.
There you are, and I agree with you. I say that lovingly, not ego-based or anything, but no, it's perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, and I hope lots of people come and listen to your first podcast, and because it's there's a lot about Metallica in it, that they enjoy all the good information. It's funny. I was a young person who had no fear. New York was crazy back in the day, and they called it Fear City for a while. When I used to come into the city, when I was probably like 15 years old, I used to go see my dad. He worked at a municipal workers union called District 65. It was right there on Astor Place. And I would visit him on the weekends, on Saturdays when I was off from school and stuff. And I knew, or I saw, that there was a newspaper called The Village Voice. And in The Village Voice, they had everything. Music, art, theater, porn, real estate. They had everything. And that became my first Bible, so to speak, because when I opened it up, I had heard about places like CBGB and Max's Kansas City and Great Gildersleeves and all that stuff. And back then, us young people were never carded for some strange reason. Now, I'm going to be 65 and they still want to know like how old I am. But back then, I was 15, I looked like I was 12, and I was starting to go to like mostly CBGB. CBGB became my home away from home. And I read about bands that were playing there called Suicide and the Dead Boys and oh my God, there's so many people. Sirius Trixon, Neon Leon. There were all these people who were playing there, and it all just sounded interesting to me. So because I was always curious, I had no fear, I just ventured into the city. I would take the B train, which was the West End train from Brooklyn, into Manhattan. I had my little green duffel bag with my Minolta camera inside, and I would just head out. But I'm usually by myself, and usually it was late at night. And like I said, I had no fear, and the city was, pretty, I guess, dangerous. It just never felt dangerous to me. So I would make my way to all these places, and I got to hear so much music at a very young age, so much diverse music. And it's amazing that I know everything, and I knew to go see certain artists. Like when I heard about this band, the Dead Boys, coming into New York City from Youngstown, Ohio, I went to see them, and they were like the bastard children of Iggy and the Stooges, and I loved every waking moment of them. I loved Stiv Bators, God rest his soul, he was the singer, and they were wild and outrageous. And then, the next night, I could be taking the train uptown to see Bette Midler at the Copacabana for $25 opening night on a school night, and the shows didn't even start till 11:30 at night. So I don't know. I just went out all the time, and I knew that I just had to be out there to see and hear everything. There was nothing else I wanted to do with my life except music. It's 1980, and I was taking lunch, and I was walking down East 11th Street, and I see an Art Deco building, and there's just a little piece of paper that said Video Club opening, resumes wanted. Back in the day, it was called Casa Galicia. It was a dance hall, and this was soon going to open up as the Ritz. And so I don't know, I just went into the building. It was a beautiful, beautiful Art Deco building. And there was a man in the balcony. And he looked at me and he said, "Kid, what do you want?" I was like, "I want a job. I love this building." And he said, "Well, do you have a resume?" And I said, "I don't have a resume. I don't even know what a resume is." I was, 18 or 19 years old. And he laughed in my face. And he said, "Come on up." So I went up to this man's office. His name was Jerry Brandt. He soon would be my mentor, and we started talking about music. We started talking about all kinds of music, from the Great American Songbook to what was going on that year in 1980, underground music, all types of music. And after my little, casual interview, he said, "I'm going to give you a job. You're going to open my mail, you're going to answer my phone, and you're going to get my lunch." And I thought, oh my God, I guess I'm in the music business now. And that really was the beginning of it all. Because as a youngster, I took in everything. I was like a sponge. So when Jerry Brandt was talking to booking agents on the phone, I just listened. I listened to how do you pay major artists who are coming to play the Ritz. Maybe you sell, 1,500 tickets, and you have to price the tickets accordingly. So I was just listening to everything so that I would then know what to offer the booking agencies when someone came to perform at the Ritz. I did that for 3 years. After a while, I found out that Jerry was he was from Brooklyn as well, and he started working in the William Morris agency mailroom with David Geffen, believe it or not. And then I found out that Jerry was helped bring the Rolling Stones to the United States for the first time. He worked with Muhammad Ali, Sam Cooke. He discovered Carly Simon and the Voices of East Harlem, and and an artist named Joe Bryant who went nowhere. He was like the first, one of the first queer artists that they thought was going to be the biggest thing ever. He wasn't. But funny enough, all those last three artists I mentioned were all on Elektra Records. And little did I know that after those 3 years at the Ritz in 1983, I had an interview, same interview with Bob Krasnow, the new chairman at Elektra, about doing A&R at Elektra Records. So the same thing, we talked about music, all types of music, but with Bob, I talked about art. And, around 1980, the artists that were coming up in New York were Richard Hambleton, who you see on my wall here, Jean-Michel Basquiat, Keith Haring, and he loved that I also knew about all types of art. So the interview concluded, and I got a call from him about 2 weeks later. And he said, I'm going to offer you a job. You're going to be in the A&R department. And I think I must have said, thank you so much. He said, call Marianne in the Human Resources Department to start setting up you coming to work here at Elektra. Well, I hung up the phone. I think I had tears in my eyes because I couldn't believe that I was now going to be working at a major record label that was part of Time Warner. And when he said A&R, I had no idea what he was talking about. So I called a friend who was in the music business, and I said, what's A&R? Well, they laughed in my face. I had a lot of people laughing at my face at an early age. He said, artist and repertoire. And I thought, oh my God, okay, great. So the artist and repertoire department at a record company, I feel, still to this day, even though the music business has changed drastically, is the most important part of a record company. I'm the person who's signing new artists and developing artists. And, I say my prayers that they sell records so that I don't get fired. And so I got there in sometime maybe in March of 1983. And I signed a little band from Red Bank, New Jersey called Shrapnel. Fabulous band, love them. But I learned soon that you don't sign your friends. Fast forward a year later. I don't know if you want me to go into talking about Metallica, but they were the second band that I signed to Elektra.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to that pretty soon.
Okay.
What I was going to ask you is, and we'll indulge in your artwork and your photography and stuff like that, but let's say that you didn't get that job with Elektra or going back, music wasn't it. Is there something else you think you'd have been doing? Like if music didn't happen the way it did for you, where do you think you would be today?
Well, I don't look at stuff like that because in my head, even just listening to the radio, like I mentioned earlier, at home in Brooklyn, I bought lots of vinyl, whether it was 7-inch records, 12-inch vinyl. I knew I was going to do something. I just didn't know what that something was yet. And I never had a plan B. That's it. I never had a plan B.
You were just destined to be in music.
Yes, of course. And that's why we're talking
turned
now.
Out great.
And but yeah, I just didn't have a plan B. It was always about music.
I want to jump into some Metallica stuff. So Metallica's on Megaforce Records with Johnny Z at this time, prior to you. Kill 'Em All comes out, and initially you get No Life Till Leather, right? This comes across your desk.
At some point, Lars gave me it looked like a 6th generation tape of No Life Till Leather, yes, and I was listening to that. My time frame for everything is a little nuts because I don't remember things like I should. But the point of all this is, yes, it's 1983, and Megaforce was in existence. Small label. They put out Kill 'Em All. They put out an Anthrax record and a Raven record. And Johnny Z knew about me as a young A&R person. I knew about Megaforce as an independent label. And he came to visit me at my office at Rockefeller Center. And he wanted me to sign Raven. I think I gave him $5,000. I said, give me their best 5 songs. So when he came back, he gave me their best 5 songs. And they were pretty fabulous. But I heard Kill 'Em All. And that just completely blew my mind. Because, all of us young people who were listening to hard rock and heavy metal never heard anything really like that. That record combined I say this all the time. I hope I remember. Old school metal, British metal, speed, punk elements into this one thing that we call Metallica. So it was very different than everything else that I'd been listening to. And so I think after that, I saw them at I might have seen them at the Stone in San Francisco. And after the show was over, I met Lars and I gave him my business card. And I said, I love your band so much. And I hope eventually I get to sign you. And he goes, well, we're on a little independent label right now. I said, I certainly know that, but here's my card anyway. So about a year goes by, and I'm just doing my work. My work is I'm in the office 10 to 7. I'm listening to cassettes of unsigned artists. Cassettes, vinyl, all from independent labels, unsigned labels. And the artists are playing me the music, the managers, the lawyers, the publishers. And that's what I did every single day. And then usually when I left the office at 7, I'd go home, maybe have a bite to eat, and then head out for the night. I was out almost every single night. I just, I'm young and enthusiastic, and music has become my life. So at one point, Lars calls my office, and he says, it's Lars from Metallica, and we're coming to play Roseland in August with, it's a Megaforce night, and we're in the middle, and it's Anthrax, Metallica, and Raven, or the opposite. But it was those three bands, fabulous bands. And that was a night in New York that everyone who loved heavy metal wanted to be at that show. So I went to that show. I brought our head of radio. I brought Mike Bone. I brought Bob Krasnow, our chairman. And, as they say, it was a landmark show because that was the evening that I signed Metallica,
When you seen them, so the first time you see them is in San Francisco.
Well, no, I'm sorry, I didn't backtrack to 1982. Me and my friend Phil Caivano from Monster Magnet saw them at L'Amour in Brooklyn, and it was mind-boggling. I don't think they were ever not mind-boggling. James is a ringleader on stage. I always talk about that. He knows how to whip a crowd into a frenzy. And, my eye darted back and forth looking at all of them because it was just so fantastic. And then when it was over, they put away their gear and they came into the audience. And I remember Philip talking to Cliff at the bar. Everybody was having beers. And it was just a totally fun night. And it was a year before I actually got to Elektra, and then another year, 84, when I actually signed them.
So at this point in 82,
I'm just going out.
Is Mustaine still in the band, or is Kirk in the band at this point?
I think Kirk.
Okay.
I don't think I ever saw them with Mustaine.
Okay, because I remember just from my recollection of Metallica,
Please.
They're with Megaforce. There's some incident that happens. I want to say it was Mustaine's drinking was becoming overwhelming which is kind of funny, what we called alcoholica.
Absolutely.
So that he had to really be indulging. At that point, they say, this isn't working, and they send him on his way back to San Fran, and they're still here, which I believe was in New Jersey, with Megaforce. Mm-hmm. And then at that point, they pick up Kirk. But now when you see him, obviously Cliff is still alive, which rest in peace, Cliff. You were around their age the whole time.
Yeah, we were early 20s, for sure.
So that first show, who was Metallica with that night at L'Amour? Do you recall?
Don't remember.
I do remember that you mentioned in the book that Metallica was the median, though, when you saw them with Anthrax and Raven. And Metallica set the stage. Like, even though they were the median band, they blew everyone away.
Okay, yeah. So we're fast forwarding a little, and we're at Roseland again, and they just happened at that moment in time to be talk of the town. Those cassettes were getting distributed all over the place. Flyers were, everyone was handing out flyers to come see their favorite bands, and What was the question again?
We were just fast forwarding to it. So you see him in Roseanne. We were talking about how they were the middle act, and they were so good.
They were the middle act, but they really did steal the entire evening. And people were mostly there for Metallica. And it was, it's like, when they talk about ripping the proverbial roof off the place. They ripped the roof off the fucking place, because, they would always have been terrific. Even during, like, when people say, Alcoholica. I don't know. For me, I only ever saw great shows,
right.
In retrospect. So when the show was over, I was a little tipsy, a lot of beers, so maybe a lot of tipsy. And I made my way backstage, and I was, screaming and hollering and hugging everybody. And I think James looked at Lars kind of like, who is this person, please? And Lars says, this is Michael Alago from Elektra Records. And I think they all kind of, in my drunkenness, kind of looked at each other like, oh, brother, is this the guy we're going to put our lives in his hands, But they did. And I think about it was the next day that they all came up to my office, and we all sat in the conference room, and we had Chinese food and beer, and I gave them all kinds of music, mostly on cassette and vinyl. The Doors, the MC5, the Stooges. At one point Cliff said, just Simon and Garfunkel. I said, Cliff, I don't have Simon and Garfunkel. They're not on Elektra, but I will gladly call CBS and get you Simon and Garfunkel. He knew about a label that we distributed called None Such. It was a bit esoteric, I would say, and he wanted all that type of esoteric music as well. And I feel like that was the beginning of it all. I also felt like that they never left my office after that. I mean, they did. They went on the road and all that kind of stuff. But you know what I mean? It felt like, okay, these people are home. Now, at one point, Johnny Z was not happy with me. But, Megaforce knew that as a little label with no real finances, the way Elektra and Time Warner could help finance a band like this, that he had to let them go. They were his babies.
If I recall correctly, in the documentary, you do get James in there. All of Metallica's in there, but James does say something along those lines that, Megaforce was great, and it was like, Metallica was just a baby then, but eventually you start to grow, and you got to walk on your own. And at that point, they felt the best thing for them to further their career and walk on their own was to sign with you at Elektra.
Right, and I think he says something to the effect like, if it wasn't for Alago, ... Yeah, so he's in the documentary. They're all in the documentary, and
I'm glad that you said that, because as humble as you are, Michael, and I always tell you, as much as I consider you a friend, you are still hold a celebrity status. And in my personal opinion, without Michael Alago, Metallica may have never gone past Kill 'Em All or Ride the Lightning on Megaforce, because we don't know how far it could have took them. So again, as humble as you are, I have to thank you along. I'm going to speak for all the other Metallica family to thank you for Metallica. Gazillions. I know they hold a record for the only band to play in every continent, I believe it is. I remember they even did that show in Antarctica where they had to have like the bubble around them, and I think there was an interview James was talking about it, and their biggest concern was how to keep all the equipment from freezing. I think everyone had to wear headphones. Because they couldn't play anything out loud.
Okay.
It was amazing. But jumping back to, it's around 84 now. So Ride the Lightning comes out. Initially, it's on Megaforce.
Yes.
And at this point, this is when you have like a discrepancy with Johnny Z, because he's probably not happy you're taking his Metallica away. Mm-hmm. And you get them. Now, you do produce the rest of Ride the Lightning on Elektra, because the Megaforce records are the harder to find, they say now. But next step is Master of Puppets.
Right, but they were making that record for Megaforce initially, and then I signed them. And really all what I did for that record was it was more mechanical stuff. I mastered the record with George Marino at Sterling Sound, God rest his soul. Extraordinary record. It's still my favorite Metallica record, Ride the Lightning.
So we're at Master of Puppets. If I recall, you had some type of deal with Megaforce where both would be printed on the back of Master of Puppets
Both
records.
logos. Yes, part of the deal with Megaforce was that their logo would appear on Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets, the same size as the Elektra logo.
Now, obviously, at this point, Cliff's still in the band. I know you have some photos that I'll put into this. Is there anything story-wise about Cliff that people might not know that didn't get to see him? So, obviously, Metallica has gone generation to generation to generation after, what are we at, 40-something years
Yes,
they've been doing this?
42 years.
So, for someone like me that didn't get to see Cliff, could you kind of tell us who he was as a person?
Yeah, well, the funny part about that also is I didn't see Cliff a lot because I'm on the East Coast, they're on the West Coast, and they were always traveling. But he was an extraordinary young person. He was very smart. He loved all kinds of music. He was very funny. And for me, he really was a star on stage. People loved Cliff. He was just that kind of guy, He had that charisma and charm about him. I remember one night they were playing at the Lyceum in London in 1984, and they were getting their platinum. Platinum is, I believe, 50,000 or 60,000 in the UK of Ride the Lightning, and they were on Music for Nations then.
Right.
In the UK. So I have Polaroids, which will probably show the audience backstage that night, holding the platinum records, drinking champagne. And I was so hungry late that night. And I said, who wants to go out to dinner? So at first, nobody wanted to go out to dinner. So I took Lars and Cliff to dinner. And we went to a fancy place on Neal Street in Soho in London. And at one point, Lars, never know, one bottle of wine is not enough. There's a second bottle of wine, and we have champagne and blah, blah, blah. And at one point, I look at Cliff, and I'm like, Cliff, we can't do cocaine at the table. He's like, Alago, relax. It's not cocaine. I was like, wait a minute, what is that? He says, it's purple snuff I got at the head shop. And I'm like, oh, my God. I guess purple snuff is something you sniff to give you a little boost, but it's not like cocaine at all. So we just howled at that because the people at the restaurant, it was like a hoity-toity restaurant, looked at us, and I had to say, it's all good. But I thought that was a cute little story. Like I said, I don't have many stories about Cliff because I didn't travel with them often because I had to be at my job at Time Warner in New York. But if you talk to people just over the years and along the way, everyone adored him. He had that kind of charm and boyish personality that everyone just loved. And never mind that he was really an extraordinary musician. Extraordinary musician. A lot of people, there's that, thank God we have things like Google and YouTube these days, because time and time again, I always go back to Day on the Green. I mean, he shined that day. And I just bring that up only because it's a great clip of Cliff in performance.
Everyone, hi Cliff, how you doing?
Young people say to me, oh my God, I wish I could have seen the Dead Boys at CBGB in 77. And then I just have to say, okay, listen, there's a little thing called YouTube and Google, and you could go there and watch performances of all your favorite artists that you were just not able to see. Yes, it's not the same, but it is live. And depending on what kind of size television you have, you could watch these things on the silver screen. Back to, where were we? Were we talking about Master of Puppets? We were talking about Cliff. I'm sorry about all over the place. But like I said, I do have a bit of a scatterbrain, and that's from all the years of drinking, although I don't drink anymore. I'm coming up on 17 years. So I don't know where you want to go right now.
So Master of Puppets out, they go overseas to record Master of Puppets. You have a hand in that as A&R. Then
mostly my hand in A&R was, please stay out of the recording studio. And because they did it overseas, back then Lars would send me DATs. Okay. And I would hear parts of the songs. And even part of a Metallica song is extraordinary. Because, as they progressed, this was their third album, they really did get better and better. And the performances were extraordinary. The songs were amazing. So, I allowed them to make the record with Fleming in Europe. And because Lars sent me all these DATs and stuff, I trusted that it was all going to go well. I just had to keep an eye on the budget to make sure we didn't go too over budget.
Do you remember the first DAT that he sent you?
No. Like, what could it have been a part of? No, to be perfectly honest, no. Because like I said, my brain doesn't work so good anymore. But anytime I got a DAT from him of anything on Master of Puppets, it was like, wow, this is extraordinary. This is even better than the second album. So I knew that in my brain, I thought, well, the audience is going to love this as well. And so finally I got the album. And again, I mastered it with George Marino at Sterling Sound. And, it's a funny thing with George. I never had to go back and say, redo this and redo that. He really was a perfect engineer. I remember maybe it was, could have been a beginning of the week. I called Cliff Bernstein, management from Q Prime, who managed Metallica, and I said, I got the lacquer, the disc. And he came right over to my office. We closed the door, and we must have played the album on 10. Everybody, and I had to close the office door because everybody was, on the phones doing radio and publicity and promotion and marketing, and all I wanted to do was play this new album on 10. So at one point, Bob Krasnow could hear the music all the way on the other end of the hallway, and with the cigar and the $10,000 suit, he snuck his head in, and I did lower the music out of professional courtesy, and he greeted Cliff Bernstein, and is this the new album? I said yes. It's extraordinary, Bob. Okay, great. He just left, and we turned up the music, and we were thrilled, we were excited, and we knew that this was going to be a landmark record for them.
Yeah, I think anybody that listens to Master of Puppets is always on 10.
Yeah, so you gotta be.
Unfortunately, shortly after, they're on tour.
They're on tour in Europe.
And we lose Cliff due to a bus crash. I do recall an interview actually with Kirk talking about it, that it could have been the other way around because they played cards that day for the bunk. The bunk
and who was going to get what bunk.
Right.
Yes.
So very sad. Again, God rest Cliff's soul as well. Unfortunately, this happens. I know it affected James quite a bit, as he's talked about. So we're fast forwarding a little bit. You get contacted about it.
Yes.
The band members
It was late September 1986. I'm home on a Saturday, and I got a phone call from Q Prime Management, and they said, unfortunately, we have some bad news. And even, almost 40 years later, you get a little choked up because of all the love everyone had for Cliff. And he told me that Cliff was killed in the bus. The bus turned over, and Cliff was killed. I was stunned. I was I didn't know how to feel. I think it was that I was numb, you know. And I finished whatever Cliff Bernstein and I talked about. I said, we'll talk again, if not over the weekend, on Monday. And I had to call an impromptu marketing meeting on that Monday for everyone in the electoral office. And I let them know that, unfortunately, Cliff Burton was killed in a bus accident in Sweden. Everybody was, like in shock. Nobody knew them like I knew them at the record company. But, you have a band that's on the rise, they're the talk of the town, records are selling like hotcakes, and one of the young men gets killed. We were all so upset. We're all in our 20s. How do you process grief in your 20s? And how do you process grief when that fourth member of the band you consider your brother? It's tough. It's real tough. So, that happened. And I don't remember how long or short a period was, because at first they didn't know if they were going to continue moving forward or whatever. And I got a phone call again from Lars. Lars was always my point person. He's a chatty Cathy, and really he's it's his band, him and James's band, but he was the main person that I always spoke to. And he said, Michael, in honor of Cliff, we are going to continue moving forward. And I was excited, and I'm sure I shed a couple of tears. I'm sure at some point I out and out bawled my eyes out, like all of us, when we heard about Cliff being killed. All the Bay Area bands, all the bands who were listening to thrash metal at the time, everyone was like mortified. Everyone was in shock. And so I was grateful, thankful. I don't know if I was happy is a word. But I was grateful that Lars and the band wanted to move forward.
Thankfully for the world, I think that it worked out good, and I imagine Cliff would be proud for the progress they've had all these years later.
Oh, absolutely.
So, at this point, you're working with another band called Flotsam and Jetsam.
Oh, yes.
Okay, and for those who don't know, this is where Jason kind of started, and you knew that at this point, Lars and everyone decided to keep moving, so Jason... You recommend Jason to Metallica.
But, Jason has always been, like myself, like all of us fans, a fan, and ambitious, and I had heard about them. They put out a record with Brian Slagel's label, Metal Blade. It was called Doomsday for the Deceiver. So one day I get this incredible press package with black and white 8x10s and Doomsday for the Deceiver. And I heard it and I thought, holy crap, this is amazing. So, we talked a bunch of times. I went to go see them in Arizona, and I thought, these people got to be on Elektra. I signed them to Elektra. Again, I don't remember the order of things, but I thought to myself, he would be great for Metallica. Now, I'm in the middle of making their second record, No Place for Disgrace, with producer Bill Matoyer, and it's it's really an extraordinary record. But I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do? Because Jason really would be the perfect person for Metallica, and I know Brian Slagle at Metal Blade said the same thing. So Lars reached out to a bunch of people, friends, family, whatnot. He reached out to Slagle, and he reached out to me, and I said, well, I just signed this band, and this young person is the perfect fit for Metallica. So I guess Jason went out to do his interview and hung out with them for hours and hours, and as we all know, he got the job. And he was extraordinary in the band. I think he was with them maybe 15 years or so, maybe 16.
I don't know the exact number. He starts around, obviously, Master and goes up till right before Death Magnetic. Saint Anger, he leaves the band, because everyone knows the notorious scene where Lars freaks out and he's like, "You left the fucking band," and that's when they move forward and start doing their auditions again and end up picking up Rob Trio from I think at the time he was touring with Ozzy.
Was it Ozzy? Suicidal?
I know he started with Suicidal,
Right.
and
But
he did
maybe
some time
Ozzy.
with Ozzy.
Okay.
I don't know where they pulled him from, but I remember watching that Saint Anger documentary. That's hilarious. And, you know, they unfortunately, due to close passing, they had to move base to base. I think at one point, I remember seeing a show, and I think for me, this is the most, like, awkward time of seeing Metallica was Bob Rock, I think, played bass for them at, like, it was like a NFL game. I don't remember the team. Someone out in California, but they're like playing in like a trailer in the parking lot, and just Bob looks out of place. Did great on doing the Black Album, but
Absolutely.
not quite a front man for the bass, in my opinion. But I think with Rob, it worked out good. I do want to touch, because we were talking about Newstead and stuff like that. Obviously, I'm a big Metallica fan. So right after I meet you, back in 2017, like we were talking about, Kirk and Rob are doing the wedding band. So they're doing like, they grab some other guys from other bands, and they're going around, and Kirk's doing his museum for horror. And then they're doing this wedding band thing on the side. It's just covers. And I go up to Toronto, and you could buy a meet and greet with Kirk. And this is the first time. And at this time, you know how big of a Metallica fan I am. So I'm like, I'm in disbelief. Like, oh my God, I'm going to meet Kirk Hammett. At this point, I knew, like, I want to get their autographs and tattoo them on me. So I go meet Kirk. It was amazing. I'm sure I overwhelmed him a little bit, because I was probably showing every emotion a human could show at one time besides anger, because I was just overwhelmed to meet him, how much they changed my life. And I meet him, and then I remember watching the show, and at the end of the show, I think there's only like 150 people in here, maybe even less. And I yell at the end, like, "Rob's on my arm." And he's like, he's just funny. Like, that's why I think he's a good fit for the band, because in their older life, they seem more mellow than
So
back in
wait,
the day.
what kind of show was it that you were at?
So they did, it's like, they were just doing like pop-up shows, and they called it the Wedding Band, and they would only do covers.
Got it. Yes. Okay. Continue.
Of whatever bands they enjoyed.
Sure.
And it was really cool, and I remember yelling that, and at the end of the show, Rob hung around, and Kirk and them guys threw out a couple things, but Rob stayed and kind of signed everyone's stuff. So that's where I started with this. I got Kirk and then
it's
Rob.
incredible. That's so great.
And I remember Rob asking like the concept, and I told him, unfortunately, the initial idea didn't work as planned, because later, like I can discuss where people sign on the fly is how they sign. But fast forward, now we're in 2020, right before the world shuts down. Valentine's Day, actually, February 14th. I remember we go out to Florida, and we meet up at Jason's art gallery. And I remember meeting you at the art gallery.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
you came out, and I'm already so excited just to see you alone. And I'm thinking like, oh, this is going to be like similar to like the thing with Kirk, where it's like Jason's behind like a table, and you just kind of come up, shake his hand, and like push on. You know
it
what
was
I mean?
nothing like that at all.
Oh my goodness, no.
Yeah.
So we get in.
But, you know, just FYI, the world hasn't shut down yet.
No, yeah,
And the
yeah.
only reason I know when the world shut down, and this has nothing to do with ego, but I had a book signing for my book, my memoir, on that Friday, I believe, March 6th. Sold out at a place called the Bowery Electric. And I was doing a reading and a signing there. And that Monday, I think a dear friend of mine, Lauren, called me, and she turned on the TV. And I'm like so old school. I'm like, well, who died? And nobody died yet. And it was the beginning of COVID. But if you want to backtrack, we're in Florida in February of 2020
Right.
for Jason's
art gallery.
Him
and his wife.
exhibition.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, right. Nicole had
Yeah.
her
Art
paintings up as well. Very like fun, fluffy pop art.
Right. So I walk in.
Paintings of candy.
Yeah, her art.
Hers.
I love her art.
Oh, me too.
Newstead's art is quite different from his wife's, obviously, but I love hers. Unfortunately, it's out of my price range, but someday I'd like to have one of hers. But I remember walking in and seeing you, and I see all his art on the wall, and there's like no one here at this point. It's just like me,
It was
you.
early in the evening.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm like, man, this is weird. Like, this is Jason Newsted of Metallica. Like, I thought there'd be a line down all of Florida, you know what I mean, waiting to meet him, because he doesn't pop up often. So we go in, we meet, obviously give you a big hug, excited to see you. And you're kind of showing me like, oh, you know, let's check out this art. I remember going through the like hallway into the big art room where the next night he ends up playing with the Chop House band, which is his new band for people to know, which was obviously after Echo Brain. And I remember Lindsay was with us, and she still makes fun of me to this day because she says like my voice cracked and everything. But here comes Jason, just like he is a normal person, but he is also the bass player of Metallica. So he walks in the room, and you're just like, "Oh, hey, Jason, this is my friend Dylan," and you said it like so nonchalant, and I remember my head, like, the world stood still for a second, and I'm like, oh my God, it's Jason Newsted. And he came over and shook my hand, and he's just like the nicest guy ever.
Well, he's a sweetheart. He's wonderful. He's so talented, as we all know, multi-talented. It was his show of paintings.
Yeah, and then like after that, I'm still trying to gather myself and realize this isn't a dream and that I'm actually awake and walking around. And he starts showing us and breaking down all his artwork. And I remember there was a piece of artwork he did, and I knew I had to leave with something. You know, there would be something in my price range I could get. And he had painted like an abstract photo of you. And I remember I wanted it so bad. And I'm like, Jason, I definitely want to get an art piece. And he's like, well, which one are you thinking of? And I showed him. And he's like, no, that's for Alago only. And I was like, all right, fair enough. So I ended up getting another one. But he ended up signing it and everything to me. It was really cool.
Well, I didn't even get the painting.
Oh, you didn't?
No, I don't own the painting. He owns the painting.
I thought he ended up giving it to you.
I wish.
Well,
But maybe when he sees this, he can still give it to me. I took a picture of it. And then we made T-shirts. Limited edition T-shirts.
Which I have. I'll definitely add that to this. We'll put that photo up there. And then that first night, I remember, and again, this just goes back to how nice he was. And I want people to understand, like, in my head, like, these people are, like, almost what I would say the general public would consider to be untouchable. People like James, Kirk, all these people.
Sure.
And for him to be so humble and down to earth, I remember we go, and at this point I explained, like, hey, I already have these other 2 tattoos. I'm trying to get everybody. And I remember going in that room, and it's me and you there, and, like, I'm trying not to be super nervous, and he's like, well, let me practice first. And he writes like 1,000 times on the sheet, and he finally comes to me. He's like, this is the right one. Signs it. It's, even though it's February, it's like 100 degrees in Florida. So, the next day, it's like in the bend of arms. So I'm like, oh man, I kind of sweated off. And I asked him, I was like, I really hate to ask you to do this, but would you be able to trace? He's like, absolutely. He's like, I want it to be good. So then he redoes it. I fly home the next day, get it tatted. And then shortly after that, I remember he does a little like pop-up show in, I want to say it was like, not Schenectady, some S name in upstate New York.
Upstate New York, yes.
And we go there, and I remember seeing him and showing him like, oh, I got it finished. And, you know, he still played it so cool, like just a normal guy. He's great. We fast forward. Now I'm in Dallas for the 2-night show that Metallica's doing now. First night, me and Lars, or I'm in front of James, because now that you've seen their new stage, right? How it's like open, which I really like the concept of them doing that. It kind of reminds me of like, not that I was alive, or I was very young, the Black Album when they initially started the Snake Pit. They want to be more close, so James sees it. My sign, it's like sign my arm. You know, he just kind of laughs, fist bumps me. Lars comes around, sees me, throws me a stick. We banter a little bit. Then Sunday night rolls around, same thing. His drum set comes up. I'm a little farther down because I try to be on James's rail again. And his drum set comes up. We're bantering again, like toward the end of the show. And he throws me a stick again. And he's like, you want me to come down and sign your arm? And I'm like, well, yeah. He's like, you got a pen? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, hold on. I got a show to play. And then he goes back, and I think they jumped into Moth into a Flame, if I remember correctly.
Oh, great song.
And
great album.
It was.
Hardwired.
I loved Hardwired.
Yeah, me too.
Show concludes. They do their little bow. You know, Kirk and James, them guys. James is flicking all the picks off the mic stands. Lars and Rob, or not Lars, sorry. Kirk and Rob are throwing just the cups of picks everywhere. And I don't see Lars. So then I hear like a ton of noise to my left. And I look, and now I see like a bunch of security, and then I see Lars because he's the shortest of the bunch from all the security. And he's like looking, and he's pointing, and then he's like pointing at his arm, and he's like looking for me. At that point, I didn't know he's looking for me, but then he points at his arm. I'm like, oh shit, is Lars looking for me? Like, there's no way, all these people in the arena. And he comes over, he signs my arm. Everyone's trying to reach in. He like shoves the people away. He signs it. Then he ends up taking my phone, taking a selfie. And I think the only reason that happened is because for so many shows I was bringing like the same sign, and he finally just was like, you know what, I think, fuck it, I'll do it.
You should conclude this with that picture, that selfie.
And so are you. We love you. Thank you.
You leave Elektra at this
Yes.
point because you want to change up.
The first time I leave Elektra, go ahead.
You want a little change up, so you end up going out to Geffen.
I do.
You get the job with Geffen. If I remember correctly, you don't stay in LA for Geffen. You do a satellite office here in New
I'm in
York.
a satellite office, yeah. Because, I don't swim, I don't drive, I don't do any of that stuff that would be required if I went and lived in Los Angeles. But I'm a total New Yorker, so I worked out of a satellite office. It wasn't the greatest thing in the whole world because there was just satellite office, very few of us. So I was always on a conference call with the West Coast office. I didn't stay long there. I'm like I said, I'm terrible with years, but all I can tell you is that I definitely signed Kane Roberts, who played guitar for Alice Cooper, and at that time Desmond Child, who had been producing Bon Jovi and Cher and Aerosmith and writing songs for them with Diane Warren, produced Kane for me, and a really great record. It's too long of a story to talk about why it wasn't a success, but it's still an extraordinary record. It's called Saints and Sinners, and people all, when you talk about Kane Roberts, they always talk about trying to find that hard to get record. And at that same point in time, I signed a little underground band from New York called White Zombie.
So, as much as I want to jump into Michael Alago, the person, actually, because I'm going to really encourage people to go out and read your book. Like, they need to read it because they're going to get all this info from a lot of the things we talked about. But obviously, we had to touch on Metallica. But so, moving away from that and getting into Michael Alago personally.
Hello. Yes, you can buy the book. Signed from me.
I will put, also for everyone, I will put the link to your socials in here.
Sure.
However they want to get with you to get the book, or however you want to do that. I will list all the places that your documentary is because they need to watch it too, which we can also talk about. I know you did some animation in there, which was a big part. I think a lot of people enjoyed that you reached out to that animator. But getting to know Michael Alago, the person, a little bit outside of the record labels, the A&R sessions. So you signed White Zombie. To this day, you're still friends with Sean Uso, the bass player.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
So anyone that keeps up, you'll see that you go out and do stuff with these people. What is Sean like now that White Zombie is over? What is she up to these days? How is she as a person? When you go out, do you talk about music or do you just talk about everyday stuff?
Well, we obviously, like we're talking about, we remained friends this whole time. So whether I'm in New Orleans visiting or she's in New York, we always have a meal together. And I don't know, we just, there's nothing very specific. Yes, we talk sometimes about music and we talk about art and theater and movies. And right now, she's working on, she has a design company, Isolt Designs. And she creates all sorts of things from wallpaper to pillows.
Have you got to see any of this stuff in person yet? Or has she given you anything that she's designed?
A beautiful pillow. The pillow reminds me of the artist Peter Max from the 1960s. It has that kind of 60s flair to it. And she sometimes plays music. Not as often as probably she might like to, but she's very involved with her design company at the moment.
I think a few years ago she did a short stint where she released like a numbered version of her coffin bases with somebody. She collabed with them and
that's
released
right.
that.
Yes.
That was cool when I saw that. We've talked outside of the podcast, obviously, that you said that she's obviously just herself. She's actually kind of quiet, keep to herself. Is that correct?
Believe it or not, she's a very different person on stage and off stage. On stage, she's I was going to say a firecracker, a whippersnapper. She's really extraordinary on stage, and all the guys love her. All the girls want to be like her. She really also is one of those people who is wildly charismatic. But what was the question? What were we talking about?
Just how she is as a person these
sorry
days.
about that. And off stage, she's really just she's a lovely, quiet woman. She's adorable, as we all know. And like whenever she's here, we always try to go to art galleries and definitely have a meal together. And we talk about books and music and all sorts of things.
I think it's funny that you say like all the girls want to be like her and all the guys love her, because I don't know if we talked about this, but you're very open about it, that you're gay, and that back in the day, like a lot of the music, you loved the guys in the bands. And I hear from like older generations and stuff that when White Zombie came out, like Sean was like their biggest crush ever.
Oh,
and they
yes.
loved,
God.
she was so beautiful.
Of course.
Not that she isn't now, she's still beautiful.
With that green hair.
But
well, sometimes she had green hair.
She was just, everyone had a crush on her and they thought that was the coolest thing. Some other people I know that you keep up with is like Doyle, the Misfits.
Sure.
He portrays...
My angel. I love Doyle. Yes.
And I think it's funny that like, to you, these people, I mean, again, all these people are still people, but they speak to people in different ways. But Doyle, he's this huge muscular dude, paints his face with the long hair tail in the front.
Lock. The devil lock.
Yeah, he
the
just
devil lock.
He looks like someone that would just beat the shit out of you. But from my understanding with you, he's just such a sweetheart.
He's a sweetheart. He's very, very funny. Also a person, but believe it or not, there are very shy aspects to him. So that's why for many, many years, you never heard him do interviews or anything. And to this day, when he does do interviews, it's always in makeup, never without makeup. It's his trademark. It's how he wants people to always see him. He's an artist, he's an entertainer, he's a front person, even though he has a singer, Alex Story, who we adore. But he's when people go see Doyle, that's who they want to see Doyle. And he really is a sweetheart. Whenever I see him, we always go out for vegan food together. And, oh my God, I know him for such a long time. I probably know him since, let's see, the 80s. And then when I was at Geffen, oh my God, we're spacing out about something very important. When I was at Geffen, I signed the Misfits. You should just shoot me already. Hold that thought just 1 second. And
stand by.
We're gonna stand by. I can't believe we've been doing all this talking about Geffen Records, and I spaced out.
I was going to ask you about it, but I figured you were going to bring it up.
Oh my God!
I knew you signed
I totally
on to Geffen.
spaced out, but I made a record with the Misfits called American Psycho. It's a totally fabulous record. Great, I think they're like a pop band, so I think they're all like pop tunes, like Dig Up Her Bones and, oh my God, the song American Psycho, Walk Among Us, The Haunting, Mars Attacks, great stuff. It's produced by my friend Daniel Ray, who also wrote Pet Sematary for the Ramones. He produced Joey Ramone's solo album. He was in the Masters of Reality for a period of time. So it's produced by Daniel Ray. It was mixed by Andy Wallace. And we had Andy mix this record because we loved the work that he did with Slayer. And speaking of White Zombie, what a great record, their first album. Devil Music Volume 1, La Sexorcisto. Also produced by Andy Wallace. And like I said, we hired him because we loved the work that he did with Slayer.
So this...
Plain and simple. What?
This record comes out, and this is a record with Thunder Kiss 65.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a huge hit.
Well, you could say it was a huge hit, but it wasn't a huge hit when it came out. So I make this record with them, and, at a marketing meeting, I don't know, Wednesday or Thursday, middle of the week, and I'm talking to the staff at Geffen Records, and I'm like, this record's going to sell 1 million copies, and, that's a tough thing to say about any record, because some records can just fall flat on their ass, and it's like, next. I signed White Zombie, I think, in around 92, maybe 91, and we were hanging out in New York, going out every night together, having frozen white pina coladas every night, sitting on the floor of my apartment, just laughing and talking about music. And then they all decide to move to Los Angeles. They're smart cookies. They moved to Los Angeles because, Rob wanted to be in the center of where everybody was at Geffen. And he was very smart to do that. So they would be in everyone's face. You know what I mean? Right. So we made the record here. And at some point we have a marketing meeting. There's a release date. And I'm carrying on about how it's going to sell 1 million copies out of the box. Well, at some point, they now become... at some point, the record stalls. We sold maybe like 180,000 units. And everyone's looking at me like, yeah, Alago, what's happening here? And I thought to myself, no, this record is going to sell. Now, the next thing that happens is Thunder Kiss becomes the favorite song of Beavis and Butthead. Now, Beavis and Butthead had their own show on MTV, and they started playing that song like crazy. And for the love of those two little crazy characters, and thank God for Mike Judge creating those characters, it catapulted that record to 1 million units. You can't buy press like that. You can't, you don't know, like something like that. It's not in the cards. It's not in the marketing minutes, that get passed around every week. It just so happened that they fell in love with White Zombie. And MTV just played that song to death. And that's really how, in the end, the first time round, they sold 1 million units.
So at this point, they're under Geffen, and this album belongs to Geffen. Do you work with Mike Judge at some point to give him permission to do this?
Oh, no,
to use the song?
No, it was MTV.
Okay.
You wanted, it's
right.
1990. You wanted your artists on MTV.
Have you ever met Mike Judge? Or have talked to him?
The funny part is Mike Judge came to see them backstage at Roseland, and we were all backstage, Anthrax, everyone. And everyone's like, who's this guy? I said, it's Mike Judge. And so at one point, everybody pulls out their pens and their magic markers, and we have like cocktail napkins, and we're like asking him to create Beavis and Butthead on these crappy little cocktail napkins. And it was just a fun evening. I don't think none of us have pictures from back then. It was, in the 90s, we weren't doing selfies and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think we have photographs of that. But he did come see them that one time, and we were grateful and thankful that,
So is it safe to say that
Beavis and Butthead loved White Zombie as much as they did?
So obviously they wear Metallica and AC/DC shirts. Is Mike Judge a metal person? Like, is he a White Zombie fan? Is that why he comes out? Like, did he ever say what drew him to want to use that song?
No, I don't remember that because it was a long time ago, and all I ever say is I'm grateful that those two crazy little characters love White Zombie as much as they did.
So, speaking of meeting Mike Judge, you've met a lot of people that are in your book. Some of the names that stood out, if you can remember anything specific about them that you think would be good to share. I remember you said you met with Madonna.
No, I was. It was Christmas. It was 1992, and I was going to Liza Minnelli's house for Christmas, and I brought her a big bouquet of white Casablanca lilies, and she opens up the door and she says, "Why are you by yourself?" I said, "Well, you didn't tell me I could invite anybody." So I come in. She says, "Oh, go sit with Madonna." And I was like, oh my God, Madonna. So we're sitting, and I introduce myself, and like I expect her to say to me, I'm Madonna. And she's like, shut up, just sit down. So she was very funny and very sweet and very, very beautiful. So we're sitting, in this little foyer where there's tons and tons of books everywhere. And we just start talking. I said, you know, we've met a couple of times in the elevator at Time Warner when she was going to see Seymour Stein at Sire Records, and I was going up another flight to Elektra Records. And we start talking, and we're laughing and drinking, and she has to leave early because she's in the middle of making a movie with James Russo, this actor James Russo, so nobody wanted to get too crazy. But she was very, very sweet, and we talked about a lot of people. It's like, at one point when the door opened, it was OJ and Nicole, and we both looked at each other like, oh my God, it's OJ Simpson and his wife. And then another point in time, she was like, oh, she started talking about people and how they, I don't even want to mention that they were B-listers, like, oh, they're B-lists. And we would just laugh. Like, we were like gossiping at this point in time. And then at one point, Tony Bennett walks in. And I'm like, watch out, girl, because Tony Bennett is an A-lister if there's ever was one. And so we laughed about a lot of stuff. And then at one point, James came over and said to her, we got to go because we have an early morning call for the film. So that was my encounter with Madonna. We have to backtrack because, you know, we could talk about my life all day long because there's so many facets of things that I have done. But, you know, one thing I do remember, because you just brought up Madonna, was after my 3-year stint at the Ritz, and I think maybe 1 minute, I don't even know how to categorize it, 1 minute before I started at Elektra, the manager, Bill Brusca, may he rest in peace. Gosh, so many people have passed on. Said, you know, Michael, I'm leaving the Ritz as well, and I'm going to the Red Parrot on West 57th Street, and we need somebody to book Wednesday nights. So I said, oh my God, this is so great, Bill. Thank you so much for thinking of me. So I took the bull by the horns, and I had shows every Wednesday night, and it was everyone from Madonna to Grandmaster Flash to Ronnie Spector, Alan Vega, the Suburbs from Minneapolis, Divine, the one and only Divine from Pink Flamingos. And I did a Wednesday night with Madonna. And I was arguing with her booking agent, Rob Light, about whether I was going to pay her $2,000 or not. Can you imagine arguing with a booking agent about $2,000? But remember, it's 1983. She only had 2 songs out. That night, it was totally sold out at the more than 1,000, 1,200 people at the Red Parrot. But that's what I did for a small period of time. I also had Chuck Berry there. I booked Jerry Lee Lewis, who was a no-show, but that's also a long story. So, you know, when we start talking about my life and I start remembering things, It's
just astonishing how many people you met. Recently, Luke Combs did a cover of Fast Car.
Brother.
And I know you have some time.
I just got chills thinking about that. Yes,
with the great Tracy Chapman.
It was a beautiful thing. Bob Krasnow signed Tracy Chapman because he was speaking to Charles Koppelman, who had SBK Publishing Company. His son, Brian Koppelman, who we know and love to this day, was going to school with her at Tufts University in Boston. He saw he heard her busking in the subway in Boston, and he thought the songs were incredible. He brought them to his dad. Charles signed her to SBK Publishing, and Elektra was hot in the 80s. We really were hot in the 80s. And I think maybe we're talking about 1988 right now. And Charles calls Kraz and says, I signed this young girl, and she's going to be big. She's extraordinary. Her name is Tracy Chapman. So I go to Bob's office, and, Bob is the chairman. He doesn't work on records. He's making sure the company is running, on time. Right. So he says, this girl, Tracy, you're going to be her A&R person. Okay, fine. She's in the middle of making that historic album with David Kirschenbaum, her producer, and I get to hear the record, and it really is just sublime. It's extraordinary that Luke Combs, 25 years later, decides to do a brilliant cover of Fast Car. And on top of that, the beauty of it all is surprisingly to everyone in television land, Tracy Chapman walks out.
Right.
Whoa. Whew, got chills. Notorious for being very private. And she sings Fast Car with him. It blows everybody away. The television audience, the people in the audience at the was it the Grammy Awards, right?
I believe it was.
It was at the Grammy Awards, and what a song! But so backtrack a little. It's 1988, and Bob Krasnow signs her, and he's the chairman. He doesn't make records. He's running the company, and he says, you're her A&R person now. I got to the project when she was in the middle of making the record with David Kirshenbaum, the producer, and I think I only went to the studio maybe once or twice, and it is a stunning record. It's so beautiful. And when you first hear her voice, you're captivated by it because it really doesn't sound like anyone else's voice. So I have no real details except that the record is done. And again, I go to the great George Marino at Sterling Sound, and he masters the record for me. And it's so pristine and so beautiful and so haunting and so atmospheric that I just thought, well, this is going to be a huge record. I kind of had bits of arguments with people at Elektra because at first they wanted to put out a song called Baby Can I Hold You? And I thought to myself, this girl doesn't sing love songs. And I was a little bit of a tattletale, but I had to race to Krasnow's office and I said, you have to come into the marketing meeting because the radio promotion, our president at the time wanted to put out that song, and Bob knew it's Fast Car. So Kraz comes into the office, with the like I always tell people, with the $10,000 suit and the cigar. He is the chairman of Elektra, and he wants to know what's the story here about what the single is. And he said, well, you all know the single is First Car. And if you don't get it on the radio, don't come to work tomorrow. So, when the chairman says stuff like that, everybody has quieted down. And, Fast Car was the single. And it's a historic song. It's a song that when you heard it on the radio, nothing like that sounded like the radio. But it broke through because of just the beauty of the song, the power, and what a great song lyrically it is. It's just so hauntingly beautiful.
It is, and like you said...
Anyway, so we fast-forwarded, and how wonderful that Luke Combs, a country artist, decides to remake Fast Car. And
actually, your post is what made me go watch it. I remember... I think it was the next morning I got up and I saw that you posted that the Grammys were on and that she ended up making an appearance. It was great. And for anyone who has seen it, they would notice you could see the glow in her. She was so. It seemed like it was refreshing for her to see the audience give such appreciation to her. And then obviously the glow in Luke Combs, you could tell he was just so honored to be standing by her.
Right. I think he was a little more. He was honored, but he was in awe.
Absolutely.
And she came out, like you said, glowing. That beautiful face, that beautiful skin, that incredible voice 25 years later from an artist who is notoriously quiet, private, and she starts singing her historic song, Fast Car, with him. It was beautiful. And again, if you happen to miss it on the Grammys, there's YouTube.
Absolutely.
There's a YouTube clip of Tracy Chapman and Luke Combs singing Fast Car. And that catapulted the song again, I believe, to #1 on the Billboard charts.
With the diversity of people that you worked with in music genres, you end up doing some time working with Nina Simone through Elektra.
Oh boy. Yeah. So remember, the nutshell version is I'm at Elektra, I'm at Geffen, I'm at Elektra, and at Geffen. So the second time I'm at Elektra, I decide I'm going to sign Nina Simone, my favorite artist of all time, no matter what. It's like if I said to you, if you're going, what are your desert island faves? I can only imagine what your desert island faves are. But I think I would only want to ever hear Nina Simone's voice ever again. I had loved her since I'm a little kid. My Aunt Jenny used to play, my dad's sister, her records. And I always thought, like, wow, what is this voice? It's very almost androgynous. And I fell in love with her voice. And when I got to Elektra, I hounded Bob for years about signing Nina Simone. He didn't want me to sign Nina Simone. A lot of people thought she was tired and washed up and notoriously mean, and why would I want to work with her? Well, why did I want to work with her? Because to this day, I think she's the most extraordinary artist to ever walk the planet. Her recordings are timeless. They're beautiful. They're haunting. She also wrote a song called Mississippi Goddamn right after Dr. King was killed, and it's really like one of her most popular songs. Anyway, yeah, I just adored Nina. We became friends the last 18 years of her life. Finally, I think Bob just wanted me to shut up, and so I signed her probably in 90, because then I left for Geffen. Yeah, so maybe I signed her in like 90. And we made a beautiful record called A Single Woman with a 50-piece orchestra, and it was produced by Andre Fisher. Andre was the drummer who played with Chaka Khan and Rufus back in the day. He was also married to Natalie Cole at the time, and I was the executive producer of that album. So when Nina and I were talking about like what kind of record we were going to make, we had both missed our fathers. So we knew we wanted to make a record about love and loneliness and loss. And that's exactly what kind of record we made. It's almost like, okay, I'll just slit my wrists right now because it is such a sad recording, but it's a very beautiful recording. And I stayed in touch with her all those years. And just a little story, even though we're fast forwarding to probably 2003, April. I was going to my dad's grave because I hadn't been there all winter. So I was going with like paper towel and cleaning products so I could clean the stone. And prior to leaving to go to Brooklyn, something in my head said, call Nina in France. And I I went, all right, in my head. And so I came back home, I took off my winter coat, whatever coat I had on, and I put all the stuff down that I was going to bring to the cemetery. And I called Nina, and the housekeeper answered the phone, and she says to me, well, Michael, Dr. Simone is not so good. She had a stroke. And I said, you know what? I think her name was Juanita. I said, I know all that. I know that she had breast cancer, and I know she just had this stroke. But I really need to talk to her. So she put the phone near her head, and I said, hello, darling. And she says, oh, my sugar lips. I know you're gay, but why'd you ever marry me? I said, Nina, I think because we became better friends. And we had a laugh. And she says, I can't talk. I said, it's okay. I love you so much. I love you so much. She said, I love you too. So Juanita picked the phone back up, and I said, listen, I'm going to fly to Marseille. That Clifton, her assistant, who I was not very fond of, he needs to pick me up in Marseille and bring me to Aix-en-Provence in the south of France, because I must see Nina. That's it. There's nothing to talk about. I'm coming, you pick me up. So I go and I visit my dad's grave, and I cleans it all up, and I came back home, and I packed a little bag because I didn't know if I was going to stay really long in France or not. And it's a wild thing because I never leave the computer on at night. I always just shut it down. But I left the computer on, and I'm never on CNN on the computer. And so I woke up that morning, and the first thing I see on the computer, it says, Nina Simone dead at 70. I flipped out. I lost my mind. I just thought, well, you know what, it can't be. And, oh boy, did that tear me up for a long time. I couldn't listen to her records. I missed her so much. I loved her so much. We were really such good friends. She tortured me and I tortured her in business, but we always got the shit done. And she was so beautiful. It's like, if she looked at you sternly, you just thought, uh-oh, we're in trouble. But when she smiled, all was well with the world. She had a beautiful, radiant smile, just like Tracy as well. And she just was, for me, she was so beautiful. And I don't know, what are we talking about? We're talking about the record I made with her. And we're talking about April 21st, 2003, when she passed away. Couldn't listen to the music for about 2 years. And then I thought to myself, why are you doing this? Put on her music. Fill the air with her music. Keep her alive in your heart. Well, she's always in my heart, but just keep her alive. Talk about her to everybody present day. And, but I'll backtrack with you, and then we just have to move on from here. Nick Cave from Nick Cave and the Birthday Party, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, is promoting a concert in the UK called The Meltdown. And so Elvis Costello plays, the band Suicide plays, Nick Cave plays, and one night is Nina Simone. I get to London that afternoon. It's July of 1999. And I go to her hotel with 24, I'm always with flowers. She loves roses. With 2,000 white roses and a bottle of champagne. She's getting her hair fixed, cornrowed. She throws all the women in her suite out. And she's like, oh, I'm so glad you're here. Let's take a bubble bath. I'm like, okay. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, what do you mean? Let's take a bubble bath with Nina Simone. Like, what? So I said, well, hold on a minute. So I checked to see if we have bubbles in the bathroom. So the pharmacy in London is called the Chemist. So I called down to concierge and I called them, and I said, do you happen to have bubbles for a bubble bath? And they're like, no, sir. I said, well, you need to find bubbles right now. So they found bubbles. And, Nina gets undressed. I'm a little like, I don't even know what to say. So I kept my boxer shorts on. I get in the bubble bath with her, and we laugh and tell stories like if we were 14 years old. And actually, after her performance that evening, I never saw her again. So between 99 and 2003, we talked a lot on the phone. And I don't believe I saw her again because it was very rare that she came to the United States to perform. And after that, in that time period, she was becoming very ill. And she wasn't taking her medications the way she should. And if she was drinking them with wine, which you don't do. But yeah, Nina Simone was, for me, the most extraordinary artist that ever existed.
I know you said that's the last time you saw her, and may God rest her soul, but I mean, that's quite a incredible last meeting. Like, I mean, I don't know anyone else in the world that could say, well, my last interaction with Nina Simone was drinking wine in a bubble bath. Champagne in a bubble bath.
We took a bubble bath together.
Exactly.
People are always like other artists who revere her. And even when I told her daughter that, she says, mother was not like that with too many people. I said, well, Lisa, I just have to tell you, we really did love each other. We laughed and carried on. And always, when I was in Los Angeles, I always stayed at her place till like 2 o'clock in the morning. We ordered soul food. It was really, we had a very special relationship. And so even when I tell other artists who know about Nina Simone, it's like, wait a minute. You took a bubble bath with me. I said, I did. What can I tell you? It's the God's honest truth.
And so with Nina Simone, you talk about it in the book. And for the people that don't know you, as much as you are, sweetheart Michael, and you seem so sweet all the time, when they watch the documentary, read the book, they'll know that you are also very stern and to the point. And you talked about Nina being sort of a diva in the book.
No,
so
she wasn't. She was a diva.
She was a diva.
Capital letters, DIVA, capital letters.
So I think that relationship for you guys worked well because you had this mentality of just sticking to it. Like you talk about the banter you guys had in there, but for her it worked and for your relationship it worked. The question I have about that is, aside from her, is there anyone else in the industry you worked with or even came across in the industry, whether it was a green room or just trying to meet somebody that was either a diva or just an asshole, or like anyone that you can say, yeah, I would never want to meet that person again? Or
Good question. No answer. I always tried to work with artists that I had some affection for. You know, when other A&R people were signing everything under the sun, I was very specific. If I didn't love the music, if I didn't feel something for the music, I just couldn't be bothered. So no, she, in my whole 24 years of doing A&R, I never had that kind of, and still I never had that kind of I never had that kind of relationship with an artist that I'd been working with. Now, not being in the music business anymore, I totally adore, and we've talked about Shawnee Salt. She's one of my dearest friends, and I just bring her up because she's somebody I still am connected to in 2024, and it's a beautiful thing. So, we're talking about so many things and we're trying to cover so many bases that we'll have to do a part 2 probably. But in saying that, from working in the business from when I was 19 at the Ritz to when I was in my 40s, I guess, in 2005, that 25 years I did A&R, and it was at a glorious time when people were buying records and listening to all sorts of music, like myself. I always came from a fan's point of view, but because I worked for a corporation, I really had to sign things that I felt were really going to make a mark and that were going to sell. During those 25 years, I became an alcoholic, and it was not fun. You know what? I had fun, but like they talk about in 12-step programs, it's fun until it's not fun anymore. So I have no idea how I never got fired from a gig, and I did always show up, not in my best condition, but I did always show up. And I drank for a long time, and I drank, and then at some point I acquired HIV, and as time moved forward, at some point I had full-blown AIDS, and that was in the late, maybe like very early 90s, and there was no medication, and I had to stop working, and I was lying on the sofa for about a year. I had what was called wasting syndrome, where I was losing weight, I was vomiting everything, I was shitting everything out, and I became like a twig. I was really just kind of awful. And all my friends would come and visit me, and everybody left crying because there was no medication. There was nothing. Thank God I had an incredible doctor, Barbara Starrett. I was just, it's so funny because I've been thinking about her lately, and I gotta find her. I know she lives in Arizona, but it's been hard to locate her. In any event, she was extraordinary. She was my primary care doctor, and at one point she said, you really should go to the hospital to St. Vincent's. And I said, you know what? I'm not going into the AIDS ward, because you know what? That is what will kill me. She didn't agree with me, but here I am lying on the sofa, and she had she had other things to do than come visit me every single morning before she went to the hospital. She was a big old gal, and she would ride her bike to my house like at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. And, we had many conversations about, what was going on in the gay community and in the world. and how this was affecting lots of people from, everyone said it was a gay disease. It's not just gay, it's intravenous drug users. If you were screwing the wrong person, gay or straight. And at one point she says, you know what, there's no medicine yet, but I'm going to give you an IV of vitamins, and I'm going to give you the other IV of pentamidine to help your lungs, because my immune system was shot. I had no immune system. So she really looked after me carefully, and she said, there's these pills from Mexico, and nobody knew what these pills were. And she said, I'm going to give you these pills, and let's at least try them. And I thought to myself, well, it's either going to help me, or it's going to kill me, or it's not going to do anything. They did nothing. So at one point, on one of Barbara's morning visits to me, she said, there's a medication out called AZT, and I don't want you to take it. And I'm thinking, okay, you're keeping me alive. I'm not going to take it. So I didn't take it. Within about 6 months or so, all my male friends in the community or at record companies, they were all dying from taking the AZT. And I thought to myself, brother, I'm glad I listened to Barbara and I didn't take it. So I'm still not well, but I'm not dead. And at one point she says, there's a medication, I believe it's called Sequinavir, and that's what you're going to take, whatever you say. So I start taking HIV meds, plural. There were others that were coming into the marketplace, and I started to get better. And I gained weight little by little, and I was back at Electra. And when people saw me, they were a little taken aback. And it was a time period where people were still wondering, can I shake Michael's hand? Can I hug him? People were still a bit ignorant to HIV/AIDS. And yes, you could hug me. Yes, you could shake my hand. And I was back at work. I was slow moving, but thank God, knock on wood, I never got that sick again.
So we've talked a lot about your life in the music industry, but for the viewers, I want them to know what it's like now. What is a day in the life of Michael Alago like today?
Oh, brother. It's the same every day almost. I wake up, my 2 feet hit the ground, and I start with prayer. I sometimes say the Our Father, the Hail Mary, the Glory Be. I say the Serenity Prayer, the St. Francis Prayer. There's all these great prayers that are out there that help the mind, the body, and the soul. So I start there, and then there's a list of thank yous. I always say thank you, God, for waking me up. Thank you for waking me up sober. Thank you for my 12-step meeting. Thank you for my friend Elizabeth. Thank you for my sister Cheryl. And the great relationship we have since Mom passed away. It's better than ever. And I just make that whole list of thank you with my close friends who are in my life on a day-to-day basis. And then after that, I probably take a shower. And then I have my tea and my oatmeal. And then the day really starts when I get to my 9 o'clock 12-step meeting. That's usually 1 hour from 9 to 10. Most of the time I go 7 days a week. I don't argue with myself about going. It's very important to stay in the program. It's like I never want to use again. And I'm coming up, let's see, October 13th, I'll be 65. October 21st, I'll have 17 years clean and sober. And, like anything in life, it's all one day at a time. And that's how my day usually begins. And then I run errands, I watch movies a lot, I read, I go to art galleries. I'm a big lover of the Broadway stage, so I go to Broadway a lot, and it's more expensive than ever, so I'm happy that people take me to the Broadway, to the theater. And I don't know, sometimes it's all as simple as that, but that happens on a day-to-day basis,
It seems like now that the music industry is behind you a little bit. It's still a part of your life, of course, but it seems like you're really just doing what you want in life. I know recently, if people keep up with you, you were just in Arizona, correct?
No. You mean I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma?
Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's where it was.
Yep.
It's for the Outsiders, correct?
Well, Essie Hinton wrote a book called The Outsiders when she was 15 years old. And at some point, Francis Ford Coppola made a movie, I believe it was in 1983, and he got all these very young actors named Matt Dillon, Ralph Macchio, Patrick Swayze, Leif Garrett, Diane Lane was in it, in the movie. All young people prior to becoming like names. And it's a classic movie, and it's a beautifully written book. And Essie Hinton is still with us. She just had a birthday yesterday, as a matter of fact. And all that, 50 years later, of The Outsiders, there is a musical on Broadway. I went to see it twice already. It's fantastic. Oh my God, it's thrilling. It's very exciting. It won the Tony Award for Best New Musical. And because of that, I thought, I had read about that Danny O'Connor from House of Pain, the hip-hop group, purchased this little house that was falling apart. And it's where Coppola filmed some of The Outsiders. So in 2009, when he was on the road with House of Pain, I think he had like the tour bus stop or something like that. And he saw that it was for sale, and he purchased the little building. And right now, it is a small museum, and with so many kinds of artifacts from, sneakers and leather jackets and photographs and all artifacts from The Outsiders film. So I just went there, and that's how I met Danny, because he saw that I was coming to Tulsa, and he picked me up at the airport, and he's really a hilarious man, very funny, so many jokes you can't keep up with him, very smart, and he showed me all over Tulsa. I was only there for a long weekend, so I stayed across the street at the Greasers Hangout. No, the Greasers Hideout, it's called, and it's part of the museum. It's a little B&B, and it was beautiful, beautifully kept, memorabilia, photographs, floor to ceiling, everywhere. And, he drove me around. I went to the Bob Dylan Center, the Woody Guthrie Center. I went to an area called Black Wall Street, where in 1921, it's very famous, that area was burnt down to the ground, and it had to be, revamped. And there's a museum there called Greenwood Rising, because everything in Black Wall Street is on Greenwood Avenue. So I got to do a bunch of really fun stuff, and I didn't even know how culturally rich Tulsa is. So I went to some bookstores, I went to some record stores, I wandered around, and I got there on a Thursday morning, and I came home with the airports being what they are these days. I got home really late Tuesday morning because I had to sit in the airport that Monday night. But it's really a wonderful place. It still feels like it's in a place of rebuilding, and that was just a fun trip. So I have to figure out what my next trip is going to be.
Hopefully down to see me
in Savannah, Georgia. That sounds fun.
That's where part 2 could happen.
There you go.
Going forward, talking about books and The Outsiders, your book comes out. And I did watch the docuseries first, obviously. And then I remember you mentioned to me when we were texting that you had a book, you were in the progress of making a book.
Sure.
And I remember texting you like every 2 to 3 weeks, like, Michael, is the book coming soon? Is the book coming soon? And you'd be like, oh my dear, just wait, it's coming, like, we're finishing up, it'll be out soon. And I couldn't wait, and I finally remember you saying it was coming out, and like the day of the release or whatever time it was, I remember I was on there ordering it. You were gracious enough to sign it and send it to me. But the thing I loved about the book is, for me, it was so captivating. Like, when I read it, not only do I hear you reading it to me, it's written in your voice.
Sure.
But it was almost like watching a movie again, because I could see the stories and the life that you talk about living through your eyes. That's what it felt like to me. Like, I felt as I was reading it, I was inside your body watching it happen firsthand.
All those words came from journals that I kept since I was 15 years old. So even with a co-writer, my dear friend Laura Davis Chanin, I forced it upon us that we would pull from the journals that I kept, because those journals as a kid I didn't know any better except to sound like myself and write like myself. And there was nothing highfalutin about it. It was all, this is what I did as a teenager. This is what I've been doing as an adult. And so I always wanted the book to sound like my voice. So for everybody who knows me, and for everybody who knows me present day because of all the interviews I've done online where you could see them, anywhere, they hear my voice. So it's a little extra something to read the book and go, oh my God, that sounds exactly like Michael. And it should, and it does. I wanted the book to be very well-rounded. I wanted to talk about everything in my life, from Brooklyn to listening to music on a transistor radio, to going out to the nightclubs, to starting to sign bands at record companies, to my alcoholism, to my sobriety, which is the most important thing because it helps me present day have a life. People should know that I'm a person who's an HIV survivor. They should also know that because I don't drink and drug anymore, coming up on 17 years, my body is in great condition. They can hardly even, my viral load is at 0. It's non-detectable. Again, that's a miracle. I take 1 pill a day, and that 1 pill a day, it gives me the strength just to continue moving forward. And so what was your last question? I'm sorry.
Just that you had a new photography book coming out.
Photography. Yeah. So, I did A&R for 25 years. We'll start, not just A&R, but when I started in the music business in 1980, I finished in 2005. So that's a good 25 years there. Even when I was sick, I maybe didn't work for almost a year, but when I got back, I was full speed ahead, like I am with everything in life. So when I was done in 2005, I always went around with a camera wherever I went. So whether it was a little plastic 110 Kodak camera, whether it was a Polaroid camera or my 35 millimeter Minolta camera that I carried around in my green knapsack, I always took pictures. I love photographs. I love the stories that pictures tell. So I decided, I'm taking pictures. And people would say, do you shoot rock and roll bands? I'm like, no, I don't know if I ever want to shoot rock and roll bands, although I have shot a few. Most of my photographs are portraits of men, tattooed, that I'm attracted to. So I have 3 books out. One's called Rough Gods, one's called Brutal Truth, and one is called Beautiful Imperfections. I'll send you the book covers, and if you want, you could put them here on the podcast.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So my second book, Brutal Truth, which has about 250 pictures in it, and it really is my best book. It sold out quickly, and these days, even when I look online for it, I see it selling for $750 in certain places. So it really made an impact on people. Right now, I'm looking for a new publisher, and I'm working on a book called Polaroid Encounters. Again, it's also portraits of men, and that I took from 1998, I think, to 2009. A very select, pointed bit of time. And they're very strong. Some are nudes, most of them are portraits. And I had Sean from White Zombie write a blurb for the back of the book. And we're hoping that I can close this deal soon so that it's out by this Christmas.
Perfect Christmas gift.
Well, I guess as we're coming to a close here, I just want to say thank you for interviewing me for your podcast, wherever I may roam. And I think we did talk about my documentary, Who the Fuck Is That Guy? The Fabulous Journey of Michael Alago. And I always say these days, we're like the little train that could, because we started out on Netflix for 3 years, and then it wasn't anywhere for just a moment. And then our distributor called and said, well, would you like it on Amazon Prime? Yes. Tubi? Yes. Google Play? Yes. Xbox? Yes. And YouTube. Well, here we are now on 5 platforms that we had no idea that we would ever be on. So it's a blessing also, one of my favorite words, blessings and miracles, that the film still exists, because a lot of documentaries just come and go. And they have their day in the light. But this seems to be, it has so much life and so much energy, and people from all over the world, from Israel to the UK, to everywhere in the United States, always writes to me and emails me and texts me about how much they love the film. So I'm glad I could give that to people, with Drew Stone, our director, and Michael Alago, our producer, that we really made a cool film about a person who was a hard worker and worked with extraordinary artists, and that because I have great relationships with these artists, they all said yes to being in the film. Even people like Phil Anselmo from Pantera, who I never professionally worked with, but he wanted to be in the film because he's a dear friend, and I totally adore him. So he's in the film as well. Anyway, so it's right now on all those platforms, and I'm grateful for that. And so, anybody who wants to see the film, I'm sure we could put up before the end of the interview, we could put a poster up of the movie with all of the platforms. And also I have my memoir, I Am Michael Alago, Breathing Music, Signing Metallica, Beating Death. It's a good one. It's more stories that I wasn't really able to tell in the film, because you can't, I don't know, I always feel like you can't go on and on and on in the film. So I think we stopped at a good 75 minutes, and we got a lot of information in there. So, people got to see some of their favorite artists, whether your favorite artist is Johnny Rotten or Cyndi Lauper, or you're like, oh my God, I can't believe Michael worked with Nina Simone. And of course, Metallica. And I love that James is in it, and I love that he speaks, I don't know, kind of lovingly, and I totally adore him. Anyway.
I think we talked about being on year 7 since Who the Fuck Is That Guy? So maybe for 10 years, if for some odd reason Drew Stone sees this, we could get a part 2 or an up-to-date of where Michael is now.
Let's make it updated. Who the fuck? We're wrapping this up, but I think you wanted to end with me perhaps talking about my mom?
I definitely want to end with that because, like I said earlier in the podcast, I see myself in you a lot. I'm very close to my mom as well, just like you were, and I feel like it's only appropriate because I think a lot of inspiration came through your mom into you.
Oh, of course.
And short story, I remember the first time we met, we sat on the bench. I had a really small family, and I just lost my grandfather, and you had just lost your mother. Mm-hmm. And I remember it was a very hard time, and we sat there after our meeting after we went out to lunch together, and we talked about it. And I remember we kind of both sat there, and I think you put your hand on my knee and I put my arm around your shoulder, and we just shed a couple tears and talked about the joys of those people. And I really felt that connection. And then again, going back to seeing myself in you and being so close to my mom, I want to dedicate this podcast to Blanche. I want to thank you so much for doing this. It means the world. You're such a dear friend. And I'm going to let you say what you feel would be best to end it with Mom.
Oh, sure. Unfortunately, my mom didn't get to see my film, and definitely didn't see my book, or read my book, which came out in 2020. And, so like her last years, she would always say, "What is it that you do again, Michael?" I said, "Ma, I'm a talent scout." And I would explain A&R to her, and she'd look at me like, yeah, okay, didn't get it, but that's okay. My mom was very old school, and she started asking me a lot of these questions when she was already in her 90s, but she was very funny and very smart and very loving person, and people adored her because of her openness and her kindness. So with her not getting to read the book or know about the book, the last chapter in the book is about Blanche. And I found a little quote that I'm going to read because she had passed already. The living are made of nothing but flaws. The dead, with each passing day in the afterlife, become more and more impeccable to those who remain earthbound. Yeah. So, in her last years, I would always go up to Vermont to see her. And she just loved that I would visit her because she would always say, "That's my Michael," It would aggravate my sister. But, I don't know. I guess sometimes boys and their moms are a special thing. So whenever every few months or every couple of weeks, I would go up to Vermont to see her and my sister, and she'd always get the blow-up bed and put it in the living room, and she always loved that I would stay with her for long weekends, and I loved it too. So like I said, it was a blessing that when she passed, I was clean and sober. I had already been clean and sober 10 years, and you know, by the time those last days were upon us, Cheryl and I visited her in the hospital. I think we were there a couple days and before she passed, and she was all just very uncomfortable with her body and her breathing and everything. And you know, when she passed away, I always like to say, because people ask me about Blanche, she was the first person to ever hold me, and I was the very last person to ever hold her. So that's like 180 degrees of beauty.
I love that, though.
Life of, yeah, Blanche.
Get out of here.
I am. I'm making a little movie on you. Look.
Don't bother me. Leave me alone.
Why?
Because I don't want to take no pictures.
Well,
I had enough pictures.
I know, but this is a little movie.
Oh, shut up.
Come on. Ma.
Oh, R-A-C. 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 R-A-C.
Ma. You look good for the camera. Don't do that. Hey, don't be fresh.
Hay is for horses.
Well, don't be fresh to me.
Since when you tell me what to do?
Today.
That's right, no other day.
You know what?
Shut up.
I love you.
And I adore you.
Good.
Good, me too.
Okay, bye.
Goodbye.